Welcome to the Therapists Uncut Podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young and Alyssa Nahara.
Welcome back to Therapists Uncut, guys. My name is Alyssa Nahara, and I am here with Nikki Young, licensed marriage and family therapist, amazing human being, and BFF.
I just got upgraded to BFF.
BFF! You about to piss a lot of people off right now. No, I'm just kidding. Legitimately,
we can share.
It is all about love, and legitimately being here with Nikki, being here with our team, and being here with you guys brings me so much energy. So if you guys haven't noticed already, I come in like ready because I'm like on a natural high when I'm with Nikki and Stacy and Anthony, and when I have you guys. So thank you for joining us again. This is actually part 2 to our self-awareness episode because we realized in part 1 we got a little carried away with our own stuff that we forgot to actually give you guys tools to help you improve and increase your own self-awareness. So that's what we're going to do today.
I just want to make a side note that it is quite impressive that we have this much energy. So clearly the energy we gain from one another is substantial because we record these at 6 a.m. and Nikki is not, in Nikki's old age, Nikki is becoming more of a morning person, but a ton of energy is not something that comes natural to me at 6 a.m. Alyssa, maybe a little bit more so, but
it's not natural.
Okay. So this says something about the dynamic we got going on here.
It is a purely our energy and your guys' energy, and I love it. All right.
Team.
Back on topic. What else are we talking about today, Nikki?
Well, I think it might be a good way to start this episode by exploring ways that people might not be self-aware or ways in which people might lack self-awareness. And then I think from there we can jump into a little bit more detail regarding how to then increase self-awareness. Does that sound like a plan?
It does.
Okay.
And I'm wondering that as we talk about this, people are going to be like, oh yeah, that person, that sounds like this person.
It's easy to point fingers, right?
Totally,
but we're going to challenge you to turn those fingers around and point them at yourself a little bit.
Yes. I want to start with blaming other people and failing to be accountable for your own actions.
Right? When things don't go as planned or things go a little wonky, it is very easy to blame the people around you, right? Late to school in the morning, late to work. It's very easy to say the kids weren't dressed, the breakfast wasn't ready. But maybe even if they had been ready, you then wouldn't have been ready. So was it really the kids' fault that everybody was late? It's very easy.
Well, are you talking to me?
I'm talking
Yes. I was just thinking about the episode we had on shitty bosses. If you guys listen to that, do you remember the boss we talked about that just has no insight? Or maybe they do have insight and just still choose to blame the entire team. Yeah, they just don't care. Again, don't be that guy or gal. So notice how good you are or are not at being accountable for your actions.
So if you have a relationship, whether that be a very close interpersonal relationship or a more casual acquaintance, but let's focus on the close interpersonal relationship. If you have a relationship where you feel as though the other person is quite possibly the only person to blame for all of the relational problems, then maybe it's time to utilize some self-awareness because that is likely not the case. Usually it takes 2 to tango.
Yes. I'm sorry. I was thinking about a TED Talk that I just listened to. And if you guys look for anything motivational, TED Talks are always great, right? And this gentleman was talking about how he wrote a paper on his divorce. And his professor basically told him about, look, I get it. Y'all had a codependent relationship. But let's talk about your role in this. Like, ex-wife is not the problem here. Let's talk about your role and how you created this and how you enabled it and how things could have been different. And I think especially in separations, breakups, divorces, it's really easy to blame the other person. And yeah, I'm sure the other person and the partner, ex-partner now, could have made some changes. But Nikki's right. Think about the behaviors that you're exhibiting. Think about the things that you are saying. So just be conscious of whether or not you're accepting responsibility for your choices and being accountable for them, or if you are very quick to blame others.
And as you talk, I just hear the opportunities, right? There's so many opportunities. So, in the case of a breakup, okay, if you have kids together, there's going to be continued contact. But if we're talking like a separation where you're not going to have interaction with this person going forward, it can be very easy to play the blame game. Mm-hmm. Right? Attribute everything to the person. And, you can go on like that and shut that door and go forward with that mindset and nothing will ever really happen. However, that is such a huge opportunity to explore what role you played in it. Right? You don't even have to admit it to other people. Like you could just
explore. You don't have to say it out loud.
You just start by just exploring it in your mind, seeing if there's any iota of that maybe you could have done differently.
You use so much language sometimes and I'm like, I feel like I need to look that up. I don't know what iota is. Just in case anybody out there also does not know, I feel you. All right, next sign that you are lacking self-awareness, your ability to empathize with others. How good are you or not good are you at empathizing with others? And now this is different from sympathizing. We're not talking about sympathizing. Now that I'm trying to put it into a definition, I am failing. Nikki, how would you define empathy?
Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? So maybe not 100% agreeing with where they're at or their response, but having an understanding of where they're coming from. Being able to see that person's side. And again, doesn't mean that you have to see things the same way from your own individual perspective, but being able to put yourself in that role. It goes a long ways.
It does. Just the ability to be open. There's so much in this world, just even in the last year, 2 years, that so much good can come from being open to these conversations and empathizing with experiences that have happened, whether or not you agree or don't agree, but just empathizing with the experiences of others and trying to understand those perspectives. If you are somebody who immediately shuts those experiences down, it may be a good time for you to start practicing some more self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Right, because I think that society has handed us on a silver platter many examples of how we might lack self-awareness when having these conversations about major societal and community concerns. So another warning sign that you might lack self-awareness is if you so strongly disagree with somebody's viewpoint that's different from yours and you can't see any merit in it. When you cannot see one iota of validity in somebody else's side, or at least see where they're coming from, then that's probably a sign that you maybe lack some self-awareness, because how frequently is somebody going to be entirely wrong about everything, right? Now, there might be things that you absolutely, on a moral or ethical level, cannot get behind. However, how often is somebody completely wrong about everything?
I'm thinking about the person in the relationship who always has the last word, who always has something to say, who always has to be right, which basically implies that your partner is 100% wrong all the time, and that doesn't feel very good.
Mm-hmm. If you are that person that is always arguing, just arguing, you likely, potentially, might lack some self-awareness, because possibly some of what you're arguing is others trying to give you some feedback that could smooth those relationships out.
And I like how you said likely, possibly, might.
Right.
Nikki was just being really nice, because if you remember in our last episode, we talked about the research that said 90% of this population that was questioned or interviewed, however you want to say it, thought they were self-aware, but really only 15 to 20% actually were. Yeah. Most of us have lots of room for improvement in this area.
Absolutely. Which is why when we're in a therapy session with somebody, if we're working on something that requires self-awareness, whether it's time management or prioritization, we are going to encourage you, and it's going to look a little different for every exercise, but at some point we are going to encourage you to take this work that you've done and take it to somebody you trust, whether it be a spouse, sibling, friend, and get their feedback, because we are so terrible as humans at accurately identifying our strengths, and we're probably pretty good at it. Well, no, we're very ready to identify our weaknesses, but even those often aren't accurate. And sometimes we're very willing to identify what we think are our strengths, and maybe we're not all that in a bag of chips. So getting that feedback from others is invaluable. Does that lead us into talking about what we do about this lack of self-awareness?
You mentioned self-awareness in therapy, and I'm just going to give a little caveat real quick. People sometimes think therapy is, I'm just going to go in and vent and talk about all my BS, and why am I going to pay somebody to do that? I mean, you can do that in therapy, but we are also going to help you with the process of self-reflection and self-awareness and goal setting. And here's what happens sometimes when clients are not quite ready.
They don't come back.
Self-awareness. Yeah, they don't fucking come back.
They don't come back.
So I just want to let you know, if y'all are ready to go to therapy, or if you have been in therapy before, you know that there's a level of discomfort, because part of this process is to build a therapeutic relationship with you so you can be in a place to accept some of this feedback and consider where you are and where you want to be. But yeah, you're right. I watched a movie that was about, I think it was called The Meddler. I don't know. I watched it on a streaming thing, and this mom loses, like, she's empty nesting, I guess. She loses her adult child. She moves out, right? She's a widow. She lost her husband. Well, then she starts doing things for all these other people. She meets the guy at the phone store and starts taking him to his classes because he needs help. She starts paying for the wedding of the friend's daughter because I have the money. And the therapist is like, is it possible that you're trying to fill a void that has resulted from the loss of your husband and your daughter moving out? And she was like, no.
Never.
No? What? So anyways, readiness, guys, just thought I'd throw in that tidbit. Be ready to accept feedback. That is also one of the greatest ways you can improve your self-awareness. Yes. But if you are feeling like you are not ready and you are responding with high walls and levels of defensiveness, that could be a red flag.
Exactly. I think that's huge too, right? So if you notice yourself getting feedback and you're like, no, shut it down, that is definitely something to pay attention to. Because if you're getting feedback that just isn't accurate, it's likely not gonna get your juices flowing quite that strongly, right? You might not have such a strong reaction. So anytime I have a strong reaction to something, I'm trying to challenge myself to look at why that is.
Yes. Okay. We are going to segue into what you can do now, tools that you can implement to help you increase this part, right? Ask yourself what it is about what's happening that is causing you to react the way it does. I like to tell people to reflect on the patterns that you're noticing, either in the people at work that push your buttons or the parents at the PTA that really get under your skin. What's the theme in all of these personalities and or characteristics? Because the likelihood is these themes are something that's familiar to you. And then I'll ask somebody, well, who does that remind you of? And it's usually somebody significant in their life, or at least was significant in their life at some point, that they're kind of getting, can't think of a better word other than triggered, but they're getting triggered by certain behaviors. You have to notice and recognize that, because the reality is that person who is driving you crazy, and that's a terrible way to say it because they're not responsible for how you feel, but the person who is resulting in you feeling really frustrated or upset or annoyed or resentful, this one person is not that significant person that they actually remind you of. So just self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely one way it can present. There's also a very similar situation in which there is a theme amongst those who tend to get under your skin. And maybe it doesn't remind you of somebody in the past, but maybe it's just a personality clash with you, right? If somebody is incredibly introverted and you are a little put off by extremely extroverted individuals, or maybe you're just quiet and somebody requires significant attention, whatever it might be, if it clashes with you, that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with you. We're not saying self-awareness is always going to shine this light on things you need to change. Not everybody's always going to jive completely. However, that does shine a light on, okay, there's this dynamic and maybe it's not working. So what can you do to then better manage it, right? Whether it be putting boundaries up, that sounded like defenses, putting boundaries in place, putting coping mechanisms in place, how to self-soothe, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. And these are important because it's going to increase your ability to respond and not react. We are so good at reacting because it's just kind of this natural thing that happens. And then by the time we're done, we're like, ooh, maybe could have done that differently. Maybe I shouldn't have cussed out my boss. Like whatever it may be.
Yeah, maybe that probably wouldn't go so well.
Probably not.
But that's a very good point, because I think so often people get stuck in this mindset of I either did it well or I failed. And something that I always want to bring to awareness is that you get very rarely in life is there one chance and you either get it or you don't. So there are so many opportunities for intervention in all of these situations, right? So if you're having an interaction with, let's say you're interacting with your spouse, right? And you are engaging in a behavior that maybe you are not super proud of and something that you have some awareness you're trying to work on, right? Okay, so I'm interrupting and that's something I'm trying to work on. So let's say I'm just interrupting. That doesn't mean that once I notice that, I have to stick with it. And sometimes we do that, right? We notice we're doing something and then we just stick with it. Anytime there's an awareness or an acknowledgement, that is an opportunity to intervene and to pull it back and to make a different choice or decision.
Mm-hmm. And be accountable, right? If you guys could have done something differently, if you look back and think next time I will do it differently, be accountable, talk about it and voice it, because this helps the other person know that you're recognizing what happened, because it likely didn't go very well. So being accountable for that as well. And I like what Nikki said when she said what, I don't remember the rest of the sentence right now, but what sticks out, because what is a great question for you to ask yourself when certain things, certain big feelings come up and visit, when certain reactions come out and you're like, oh, did I just say that? Did I say that out loud? Yeah, you did. So asking yourself, what about that? What can I do differently? What do I want to learn from this opportunity? It is not a black and white thing. It's not something that you succeed or fail at. It is a process. Mm-hmm. It's an intentional process, and it's a process that's not going to go away. And it does take that ongoing intention from us and from you to keep trying to practice and implement these daily habitual things.
Yeah. This isn't something that you are going to achieve and then you can just stop giving it the attention that it deserves. This is a never-ending, lifelong process. And it might sound daunting right now if it scares you, or if you maybe do lack some self-awareness, but it can actually be a really fun process in which you learn so much about yourself and you see just such an improvement in the quality of your relationships, the quality of your roles, whether it be at work, whatever that is. But because it is such a process, it's not going to be a completely linear process in which you start at A and you wind up at Z, right? We are going to have moments where we don't meet the expectations or we don't behave or respond in a way in which we're working towards, right? And when it comes to any of this stuff, right, there is very rarely a textbook response of this is exactly what you do in this situation. So much of this is going to depend, right? How much of this is internal work that you're just doing with yourself versus how much of this is something you're involving other people in. And I think that depends, right? If you are working on something that really only is affecting you and it's not something that you're vomiting all over other people, you might be working on it for yourself and other people are like, oh, cool, good for you. Then maybe it is more of an internal process, or maybe you bring others in just to support you. But oftentimes increasing self-awareness involves working on something that is affecting other people. So in that case, I mean, you mentioned a situation with a boss, right? So if you respond in a way to a colleague or a boss that was maybe short and snippy and not something you're working on or whatever it might be, Is that something that you just internally recognize in yourself and then just pretend it didn't happen and keep going and try to improve? Is it something you directly address with the person?
And because pretending it never happened is the easiest thing to do, right?
And oftentimes that's what happens. But is that at all remotely validating for the other person?
It really takes a level of vulnerability to acknowledge and be accountable for a poor choice that you made or a poor behavior that you had, and then reflect that back to whomever was a part of that interaction. I like to tell people it's not comfortable to own up to the bad stuff that you did or said. But if that's a value to you, then there are some things you can do to follow up with that to try to maybe not correct it, but at least follow up and let the other person know that, hey, I'm aware that I did or said this. That's not what I meant. I'm sorry I delivered it in that way. Here's what I'm trying to say. Or I like to tell people to start the conversation with, because it's never easy to start these conversations, but you can say something like, I was thinking about what happened the other day, or I was thinking about our conversation last week or a few weeks ago. Oftentimes people will tell me, but it happened so long ago. Do I even need to go back to it? Well, I'm gonna let you answer that question. If and when you choose to, here's a good way you can start that conversation. In the end, you are not responsible for how the other person feels or receives that information, but you can be responsible for verbalizing how you are feeling accountable for your behaviors and apologizing if need be, or talking about steps that you're going to take to work on that behavior in the future.
And this would all be relevant to self-awareness in relation to others, right? And there's ways that self-awareness is something we work on when it is more more just internal and personal. So for example, self-awareness of one's eating habits, right? I think we've talked about something along those lines in the past episodes, and that might be increasing your awareness of health and it's not affecting the person next to you, right? So if you catch yourself eating a bag of Cheetos instead of having some baby carrots, is that something that you're going to go apologize to somebody for or say, you know what, I noticed probably
maybe
not.
your personal trainer, but
yeah. And that's where the accountability partner comes in, right? So there's no cut and dry answer that applies, no cookie cutter response that applies in every situation. And so much of this requires self-awareness to be able to determine what the appropriate responses are. But it's this lifelong process that I'm really, really going to encourage you to partake in, because it can be fun. It can be painful. It can be hard. It can be challenging. But the benefits can be so profound that it makes it all worth it.
And we talk about therapy, guys, because we're therapists. Obviously, we think, well, I'll speak for myself. I think we could all benefit from therapy because there's always something that we can work on, no matter how privileged or how well off or not well off we are. We can all work on things. But outside of therapy, there are things that you can do on your own too. You could do journaling. Journaling is a great reflection exercise. You can choose to do it regularly or daily. You can get prompts for journaling that can help you reflect on your day and where you are and where you want to be. You can practice these communication skills and deep reading skills. In the last episode, or the first part of this 2-part episode, we talked about mindfulness practice. So that could be formal or informal meditation. There's so many things that we can do on a day-to-day basis, like tangible tools that we can do to help you guys increase and really help all of us increase our self-awareness.
Yeah. You can even bring others into it, right? I think I've made it pretty clear. I'm a big fan of that. But scheduling a once-a-month coffee date with a good, close friend that you trust, friend, family, whatever it is, one of your people, right, where you value them, you trust them, and schedule like a once-a-month or once-a-quarter learning coffee where you guys make some agreement where you're there to better yourselves. Like, you want to learn about each other. What do you have these deeper conversations, right? This is what I'm noticing I'm struggling with. You know me. What are your thoughts, right? Inviting that feedback. I think that's an awesome opportunity as well.
I think we all have those friends who we go to them, or acquaintances, whatever you want to call them, and they're like, no, that person's a jerk. You did everything right. And they're like working you up. And then if you go to the friend whom actually knows you really well and whom you trust, they're like, no, you were kind of a dick and you need to do something about it. You want to talk to that friend who is honest with you. Okay, guys?
Yep. Yep. And somebody comes to mind, a couple people come to my mind. Like when I'm having a strong reaction internally, I seek these people out because they know me a long time and they know my environment and the people around me. And I try to seek that feedback. And because it can be easy to go find somebody who's just going to pump you up inside with you, but that's not doing anybody any good. It's certainly not doing you any good. And just seeking that feedback from others.
So we're asking you guys to be reflective, to be vulnerable, to be intentional, and to challenge yourself on ways that you can increase your own self-awareness, because the benefits are exponential. The benefits at work, if you're a parent, if you're a colleague, a friend, benefits in your relationship, it's just going to impact every aspect of your life. And I promise your partner will appreciate it. Well, hopefully they'll appreciate it.
Otherwise, they need to do their own self-awareness work.
Thank you guys for joining us today on the Therapists Uncut podcast. As always, we are honored that you chose to share your time with us. If you have not yet, please subscribe to the podcast. Check out our website for show notes at therapistuncut.com. And make sure you guys share these episodes, especially if you see value in them. We appreciate when you share and when you leave us your feedback.
Thanks, guys, for joining us. And you sharing these episodes just really helps us meet our goal of making mental health relatable and a topic of everyday conversation. We appreciate you.
Thank you. See you on the next time. Why can't I talk?
See you on the next time.
See you on the next time. I'm done. That's the end of it. Okay.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.